This podcast is made possible in part by WKTV Community Media.
Welcome to the Be Nice podcast, where we dive into conversations that help us recognize, understand, and take action when it comes to mental health and suicide prevention. I'm Christy Buck, your host. The Be Nice action plan is simple. Notice, invite, challenge, empower. 4 simple steps that can change lives. Together, we'll share real stories, insights, and tools to break the stigma around mental health. And in addition, inspire positive change. Our guest for this episode is Megha Parekh, who will share more about her role as the Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer for the Jacksonville Jaguars and experience as a 988 crisis counselor. Invite yourself to reach out and look at our website. Volunteer, take action, get involved, potentially become a Be Nice ambassador, maybe host a Be Nice event. So we're going to bust a myth as usual, and this myth is, if I talk about my mental health, I'm not tough. Nearly half of all Americans have believed that seeking help for mental health is a sign of weakness. Many of these being men, being young men, middle-aged men, older adults. Stigma is huge, up to 75% of people with mental health challenges and conditions report stigma stops them from seeking help. Truth, talking about it, actually can make you stronger. Research shows that social support significantly reduces stress and depression symptoms and can improve overall resiliency. Studies have found people who openly express emotions experience lower anxiety and better psychological well-being compared to those who suppress them. A big fact, early conversations matter. About 50% of lifetime mental health conditions begin by the age of 14, 3/4 by the age of 24 years old. Talking about mental health builds connections, reduces isolation, and increases the likelihood of someone seeking help and treatment. Let's try to bust this myth with my guest today. I'm very excited. Megha Parekh is, I love your title, is the Executive Vice President and Chief Legal Officer for the Jacksonville Jaguars, where she oversees legal, human resources, technology, and capital planning. Since joining the team in 2013, Megha has played a key role in the Jaguars' efforts to strengthen and impact the community. A Harvard College and Harvard Law graduate, she's also a volunteer crisis counselor with 988 and passionate about mental health and suicide prevention. So welcome, as always. I like to get right down to the nitty gritty and get to give us a little background about yourself, Megha. Great to see you virtually. I wish I was in Jacksonville right now in your beautiful office, but just tell us about yourself.
I'm sure you wish that you were in Jacksonville too, because it's 66 and gorgeous outside. So it's not that Grand Rapids isn't great, but it is. Florida's turning the corner now, which is really nice for everyone's health and sanity.
Amen.
Thank you so much for having me on. So I've been with the Jaguars now since 2013. Before that, I was at a law firm in New York, and one of the transactions that I worked on was actually the acquisition of the team for our current owner. And when they reached out about a year after the deal closed, asking if I'd be interested in coming to Jacksonville, which I didn't even know exactly where in Florida it was, I thought, well, it's January, it's 4:30, it's dark in Manhattan, and I'd grown up in the Northeast my whole life, but I thought, let me at least go down and explore this in an interview. It was an incredible job opportunity. I thought that I'd be here, though, for a year or two and then go back up to the Northeast. And I ended up enjoying not just the job, but also the city. Because I feel like I am a happier, healthier person being down here. So understandably, when you're in professional services in New York, the schedule's intense. And while we do still work a lot, the environment here and the culture here just really encourages a lot more in terms of the ability to have hobbies and to be outside, all of which I think, at least for me and my personality, contributes a lot to my overall well-being.
I love it. And I really learned a lot more about you as we're heading down this road. If I ever would have Googled you and looked at another YouTube of people interviewing you, I would have said, like, she is kick butt. She is like in a great spot. But what I really love about you, and when we went down the journey with your experience and lived experience with understanding mental health and understanding suicide prevention and the importance, how those relate, right? And I think we're going to talk about Be Nice in a moment and how you were impressed with Upstream. But tell me where that passion of what we ended up bringing now to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and that is mental health awareness and ultimately suicide prevention, how you started in that journey.
So I'm 40, and I grew up like many people around my age, where it was just around that time that people started talking about self-esteem, started talking about mental health. And my hope is that we get to, based on what I know now, we get to a point where mental health is just talked about like health. There is no moral ascription to, I have a broken arm, but there is a moral ascription to, I'm lonely, or I'm thinking about taking my own life. And I feel like that to me is the ultimate goal of making them go away and having people equally comfortable talking about both of those things. I am a lawyer by training. I grew up in New Jersey and fulfilled most stereotypes of what you'd expect. And I would say that, I very much grew up in a supportive environment, but in one where it was, you suck it up, you tough it out, and you move on. I was not necessarily the most empathetic person. I wasn't always the best listener. I was one who was quick to sort of give advice. 9 years ago tomorrow, on the personal side, a friend of mine who was 14 years old when he started using drugs passed away from a heroin overdose. Around that same time, we were having some challenges with staff or players, as you would expect, and the league, frankly, was putting a greater emphasis on teams being able to provide mental health support to all of our team members and having some competency in it. And I realized at that point, I was like, look, I hope that I'm saying the right things, but especially after my friend passed, I remember thinking for me, I've failed at something, or I'm missing something, or there's a gap in my education and experience, which you very kindly just rattled off. I was like, I'm so overly educated, like in terms of rational intelligence, but I couldn't help him. And it really bothered me. And so after he passed is when I found, and I just didn't have the time to go do like a more intensive clinical program. But what I found while listening to a podcast about crisis intervention was an organization called Crisis Text Line. And in exchange for a free training, you then volunteer for 200 hours on the platform and then can continue on. But it was the hardest class that I've ever taken in my entire life. I failed one of the first tests about how to help somebody who is expressing thoughts of suicidal ideation. And that's really when I knew this is a good education I'm getting. I am learning something that I was missing. And I really did it because I thought after he passed, I hope that nobody who crosses paths with me again ever feels so alone that they can't pick up the phone and call or come see me. I want to be able to help. Crisis Text Line teaches you to have, and it's similar to the structure of Be Nice, where there is a science-based structure to the conversation that you can practice that teaches you how to respond if someone comes to you saying, I'm having thoughts of suicide, I'm a victim of domestic violence, I have an eating disorder, I'm just stressed out from school or life or work. And I knew that it would be helpful both professionally. What I never expected was how helpful it is personally. So not only do I feel more prepared and equipped, as I would if I was going into a negotiation for a contract, right? I would learn everything I could about my counterparty. I would learn the best way to approach it. I would learn theories about negotiation. This is no different. It is a skill set in terms of how you can help people who might be in crisis, who might be struggling, who might not seem right or like themselves, and what you can do to help. And I wish that everybody got this education in high school. As great as it was that I took calculus, I wish I had an entire year of learning more about this, because it's not only, I hope, helps me become a more effective contributor at work, but I also feel like I'm hopefully a better daughter, sister, friend, aunt, wife.
Love it. Absolutely. And that strong role that you're playing in bringing Be Nice. And so it is almost a year since I think Michael reached out, and but immediately he knew where he was going to go with the information to bring to the right person, and it was you. And I didn't know any history or anything until we really got to know each other. And I think it was in our first meeting that, we went through our whole spiel, and I knew that this thing really impressed you. And so share it with our podcast listeners. What resonated to you about Be Nice? And,
Sure.
that's a tough thing, right? For a football team, and the operating officers, right, y'all, on the other side to bring Be Nice. So tell me that.
So after I had gotten trained, I really did feel like what a privilege it was that people come to me in some of their hardest moments. And it is, but I also felt like I didn't need to have a monopoly on empathy or on the ability to help. I wanted other people to have those same skills. And so we had done some training for folks in crisis response, but we never had a program as comprehensive and as easily accessible as what Be Nice presented. And so my hope is that that empowerment that I feel to help anybody who might be struggling, that our employees generally, and of course our champions, feel that same way so they can do that for each other. And also when they take those skills right back home in terms of being able to help their friends and families. And so to me, it was really about trying to democratize and equip everybody with those skills to be able to help somebody in crisis. There's no greater privilege than that. We had an employee in August of 23, and I'm sharing it because it's public and with his permission. But it was a Sunday. I got a phone call. I was about to head to the beach and I was particularly exhausted. And I got a phone call from his boss, who normally would not call on a Sunday. And he said that he's in trouble and he needs help. And I remember thinking, okay, there was a conversation of give me a few hours. I need you to take me somewhere to go get help. And I remember thinking no problem at all and jumping into action. And he said to me afterwards, you know, if I didn't have you to call, I don't know what I would have done, because I knew that you would have approached it without judgment, without empathy, with a view towards he's sick and he needs help. And I just remember thinking in that moment, that is so rewarding and powerful for me. I was like, but I want to make sure that when he goes to his boss or when his coworkers have seen it, that everybody feels comfortable to the extent that they can with these tools. And I am very much a person who, as you can probably tell, really likes being prepared, likes having tools, likes having a structure, likes understanding the science behind it. And to me, this really helps with that. And frankly, it gives people the ability to practice so that when those hard conversations come up, anybody can help. Now, I am grateful that he called and I'm so glad, but I remember thinking, as an organization, we're not setting ourselves up for success if I'm the only person that people necessarily realize or know or feel comfortable to coming with about these things. I've talked a little bit about sort of being able to help other people, but the reality is that for me, getting that training was incredibly helpful for this reason, which is one, helping other people does bring its own secondary form of stress. And one of the things that we're taught is how to make sure that you're also taking time to take care of yourself so that it's not wearing you out. And that's true. It does wear you out to have that empathy and support for other people. For me, when about 5 years ago now, just under, it was a particularly busy week of work, which I feel like I must say about most weeks of work.
Yeah.
But I was about to take my first day off since COVID had hit. So it was May of 21. And that night, I was so happy and excited. I had packed. I was ready to get on the flight the next day to go. And someone broke into my house while I was asleep. And so I remember waking up to him over me. I punched him in the throat, which, to what you had very kindly said earlier, if there's ever a moment where I think of myself as, oh, I'm a warrior, that was it. That was when I felt like I was tested. And thanks to like the 2 self-defense classes I'd had in my entire life, I realized this is what I had to do. I went to my neighbor's place, and I remember, thanks to the training that I'd gotten, because from counseling other people, one of the best things that you can do if you're in that state is to just take a few deep breaths. And I remember looking at my neighbor and saying, I don't know what's happening, but I need to go outside. And I did. I have no memory of the 911 call. My memory is really spotty in terms of what it does and doesn't remember from that night. But I called the police. They came, and the man confessed by noon the next day. They'd caught him. And I just remember thinking, thanks to my training, I know that I'm not going to be myself. I make a lot of difficult decisions on the professional side. I'm also someone that thankfully people look to as a resource. And I realized then, I was like, I kind of need to let everybody know what happened, because I don't know when I'm going to be myself again. I went to work for a 9 a.m. meeting the next day, like a complete lunatic, but I made it.
Yeah.
And I think by talking about it and being open about it, and it's evolved over time, my own understanding of that situation has evolved over time. Like I shook like a puppy would shake around fireworks for about 2 weeks. Like I couldn't put heels on for about 2 weeks, but I still went to work and I was still trying to go through and do the things that I needed to do and that I felt like I had the energy to do. And slowly I healed, but I really felt like I healed with the support of my colleagues and being honest about that and being open about that. There are some people, and this is true, but it is just a risk as you talk about mental health. When people are concerned about the stigma, your concern's valid because some people who don't understand it, and frankly, it might have been me 20 years ago, may think that you're weak, may think that you're losing it. I had someone who was a good friend say, "Can we just go back to the way things were? I feel like you're not yourself." I'm like, listen, I am not myself, but, and this goes back to where you started the conversation in terms of, does talking about mental health make you weak? No, because we all have it. And so you can ignore it because that always helps solve problems, right? Ignore it and hope it goes away. Or you can learn about it, both for yourself and for others. Learn how to manage it and realize that it is just a part of being human, and that makes you stronger, right? So just noticing is not the beginning and end of it, but noticing and then learning how to manage, that will make you stronger, and it'll make you stronger both for yourself and for the people around you.
You got it. And, encouraging people, and part of that notice too, and this, it's understanding the risk factors, right? Because experiencing a traumatic event like that in your life, right? You're still going to be vulnerable to other situations that are happening. And I think oftentimes people think that, oh, now I'm fine. I mean, everything's going to be okay. And even going back, no, those events, they do have an impact on us, but they can make us stronger, but we've got to be ready, right? And that is that huge self-awareness piece that I think is also so important in mental health education, suicide prevention, is while we're instructing people to help others, it's also like upstream about self-care for yourself, just like you were saying, and knowing within myself those weak points. And I think for young men, right, and you're in an environment, I mean, we came and visited you, and you're in a predominantly male dominated industry, right? And I think, bringing something like Be Nice, right? That's what I love about you too, is it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. It's an action plan, right? But over big picture, it is about that understanding, about going back to just finding that place in our lives where I can be nice, right? And that's what, when I walked into the Jags organization, I will be honest with you, it's intimidating. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to an NFL team, and oh wow, he's the COO of the Jags. Nothing felt like that by even 45 minutes walking into this establishment. This has already been set. I mean, it's already a really super nice environment where people treat each other with respect and dignity. I hope that never goes away within your company. I don't think it will, especially with you and your team there. But how do you resonate that issue? This program of Be Nice to this high performance environment like the NFL. And I'm going to make sure that people are going to be listening to this podcast, and I want to send it out to a lot of high school coaches. Okay. And again, that environment of this tough mindset that we have to have. Help me to understand that. How are we going to do it?
Sure. So I think that there is an old school thought that somehow talking about feelings is antithetical to business, that understanding your people or being empathetic is antithetical to good business. I don't think that's the case at all. It's another arrow in your quiver that you can use when appropriate, and it'll make you a better organization. So when we talk about organizational performance, and we obviously have a football team that we are putting on the field, and then also we have an entire group of people that's supporting them, right, in terms of our business and football operations. The hallmark of high-performing organizations across the board is trust. So when you have a group of people that trust each other, they're likely to actually have a better business performance and output. And so when you frame it that way, this then becomes a part of how can I build trust and empathy amongst my colleagues so that we can actually perform better. And that takes it from being, I think, something that's sort of a mushy, soft skill to, no, this directly translates into returns, in addition to it being the right thing to do in terms of learning how to help other people, right? So there's two things can be true at once, and both those things are true. I believe firmly, and there's all sorts of studies to back this up, that having trust amongst your colleagues leads to a better output on the team. I think that, look, we all have stuff that we come with to work, and whether it's or to school or to on the field, they don't need to dominate the conversation. If you learn how to manage that stuff, you can talk about it, put it in its appropriate box, and then go about doing all the other things that you need to do, but you don't need to ignore it. There's this idea somehow that we're expected to show up the exact same way every day. And that doesn't work, right? Especially when you're in those teenage years, other things may be going on. And so you may not be performing as well, or you may be tired, or you may be irritable just because you're dysregulated. And so for anyone who's listening, if you want to get the best out of your athletes, out of your employees, out of your kids, you got to create an environment where they can be and learn how to be mostly regulated in terms of the nervous system. And it has to start there. And so different people respond differently. But for me, it's like learning about, okay, if my goal is to get the best performance out of this individual and out of the organization as a whole, what can I do to be there and support them? And more often than not, when it's things like suicide or substance abuse, being angry never really helped anybody get better in those situations, right? Being tough on them kind of tends to make people just sort of further withdraw. And so to me, being able to have that conversation, right? Invite them in and seeing what you can do, it'll not just help the person, but I also think help lead to better team dynamics and better organizational performance overall. And so that's why I think it is so important for people that are leading other people or people that are just working in teams to have these skills and learn these skills, because it will make you all better off.
Yeah, I love it. I had to take some notes on this paper, and I wrote the word trust, really huge. Because it all happens in that be nice, big picture is I trust a psychologically safe environment.
Yeah.
I love that. All right. So now, Megha, you also volunteer as a 988 crisis counselor. When someone calls or texts 988, what does your role actually look like behind the scenes?
So I still do it about 2 hours a week when I can. I'm doing it tomorrow, actually.
Wow.
And what's helpful is that honestly, I can do it from anywhere, right? So as long as you have the right equipment, which is a laptop and a strong connection, you can do it from anywhere. You are trained to make sure that the person feels like they have a human being on the other side, which I think is really important in that moment. And then the most important thing after sort of establishing a rapport, making them feel comfortable, making them feel like this is a psychologically safe space, is trying to lead them. And this was my most favorite thing that I learned, trying to lead them to determine what would be best for them in that moment. Because the reality is that someone who is in a moment of crisis, they are generally, again, there's a different, I'm not clinically trained, right? And there is a different level of support that someone might need if they are having a true clinical challenge or they need a professional. But the people that are coming here for the most part just need someone to listen and someone to ask them what would be most helpful to you. And while they might be in the middle of a thunderstorm, that doesn't mean that there is not a sunny sky behind it, right? When the clouds come through, that's just a bad weather day. That is not the end. And so you ask them, what would be most helpful to you? And I, as someone who very reflexively, again, used to immediately jump into, I want to fix this, I want to give advice. Empowering somebody by asking that question of what would be most helpful to you shows them respect, shows them dignity, shows that you trust that there is a rational, calm person in there who's just going through a hard moment, as opposed to some of the, more flippant ways that we hear these things described of, oh, this person's going crazy or this person's losing their mind. And so learning how to ask them what would be most helpful to them, and then giving them sort of a warm closing on the conversation of, listen, we are here for you always, but also you got this. And if I can help somebody by giving them some basic tools that they identify for themselves for the next time that they're in crisis, to me, that just helps prepare everybody to put their armor on and go out into the world more prepared than they might otherwise.
I love that being part of the script. What is most helpful to you? Because down deep, and I totally agree with you, it is going to be up to them. And when you say something like that, you've put the power back into them being in control. And sometimes, and I think you'd agree with me, that at that point, when they are calling, things are out of their control, right?
Yeah.
Those thoughts, they're not in control of their thoughts. They're not in control of their actions at that point, because it could be that someone's using, right? Someone's self-harming. When do most of the calls come through, or the texts, with 988? Dispel that myth, because people probably think all day long. Really, is it in the evening that most, or is it during the daytime?
It's a mixture, of course, because the line's open 24/7, right? But it is interesting in terms of the different types of populations that come in during the day versus at night. During the day, what I've found over time is that there's a lot of younger people or students who are texting in because this may be the only time that they're actually away from their home environment.
Yeah.
Later in the day, especially in the middle of the night, again, more generally tends to be adults. But listen, it changes over time. I would say that I've found that Mondays, incredibly Monday evenings, tend to be hard for people. November and March tended to be sort of high watermarks in terms of people reaching out. But listen, the reality is that I want to make myself available to no matter what time of day it is, and no matter what problem someone has, make sure that I'm there to help. But it does fluctuate. And frankly, knowing that it fluctuates and knowing that, listen, we joke about how like the bad weather might make us sad, but knowing that that's true, right? To me, all that means is don't apply that same rigidity to every single day, right? So if you know that you haven't slept well and you're going to be more tired the next day, adjust as you can, as opposed to this idea that we're expecting people to just show up exactly the same every day. Now, I will say that I beat myself up a little bit because there's so many times where I'm like, am I being lazy and not motivated, or am I adjusting as appropriate based on what my body can do today? And finding that sweet spot where you give yourself some grace, but not so much grace, right? That you don't have those things that bring you that sort of high value, longer term joy and dopamine. But finding that balance. And that's not easy. I struggle with it every day. Am I just being lazy, or am I actually sick? Or am I just being lazy, or am I tired?
Right. And again, that self-aware piece. And, a lot of it starts right at the beginning of reaching out to get that help, or being the person, right? To invite yourself in to say, you don't need to feel like this all the time. There are resources available for you. And I think that's also a stumbling block is people don't know where those resources are. And I think that's one thing that I really am excited about with the Jags is making sure that people know where the resources are, because in an organization, you have different levels of employees, right? You've got folks that, they graduated from Harvard. Then you've got folks that this is my job, right? And this is where I work. I might not have insurance, right? Or I might know people in my family network that do not have insurance. And that's what I love also about it, is just the simplicity of bringing that awareness piece also, and challenging ourselves to get out of what our box is, what my job is, and begin to look at, the folks that work the stadium, the folks that work even though they might not be a JAG employee, they still work for us somehow, right? And I know that everybody crosses over with each other. I mean, a lot of your employees in the organizational side go to the games every week. So they're in touch with everyone who's working there selling popcorn and, right, cleaning off the stadium seats, and whatever. That community that gets built also can be a big piece of Be Nice in addition. Resonating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, it is a no-brainer, and no one think twice about the fact that a football team needs to practice so they can perform well on Sunday. Having these tools at your fingertips and having them handy and having these skills, to me, it's the exact same principle, where this way, if someone comes to you and they're stressed, you are able to stay more calm if you're prepared and know where the tools are. And then for me, even I do need to sometimes decompress after I've had a really challenging conversation where I've seen somebody in pain. But I know that now, and there's no shame in that, right? Yes, it was their problem, but I also know that it does kind of wear me out. And tonight might be a Disney movie night, or pet the dogs kind of night. But look, the other thing too is that it is true that there are a lot of really great resources out there. But I'm also always want to emphasize that the best things that you can do for yourself, you were born with, which is take some deep breaths, and if you are able to, get outside and go for a walk.
Yeah, exactly.
The best thing you can do to help somebody is listen and make them feel not alone. And all of those things are free in the end.
I love it. Absolutely. I appreciate you taking the time today. It's probably busy time of year all the time. I know that the upcoming draft and everything that's coming up is big stuff for your job and for your organization, and a new move into a facility. But I want to thank you, and I want to thank our listeners today for listening to this episode of the podcast. I hope that we busted a harmful myth about severe and persistent mental illness, and hope that you might be able to share a conversation with someone else down the road or in the future using the action plan: notice, invite, challenge, and empower. Today's episode, if it resonated to you, share it with someone who might need it. Don't forget that, follow the directions, follow the 988, call 988 if you are in a crisis, or if you are concerned about an individual too. That crisis counselor on the other end can brainstorm with you also to have those good conversations with other individuals when they're much needed. I hope that you will join me and become a Jacksonville Jaguars big fan. It's a great operation. I'm a believer in what happens within the organization resonates to what happens outside of that organization to entire communities. Anyway, for now, I'm signing off. Everybody make it a be nice type of a day. Be nice.
This podcast is made possible in part by WKTV Community Media.